Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Warren. I'll be your host for this show, and I am thrilled to be welcoming onto the show all the way from California two of my favorite people, Mr. Don Freeman and Mr. Scott Waugh. They are the hosts of the legendary Trailrunner Nation podcast. And if you have any interest in running, whether you're a lifelong veteran of ultramarathons or whether you've just got into running and you're looking to broaden your horizons and go a little deeper, then I promise you, this is the show for you. Because Don and Scott have not only a huge bank of mileage themselves, they've done an awful lot of running, they've also got a huge bank of virtual mileage and knowledge of running, which they've accumulated over the 490 plus episodes of the Trailrunner Nation podcast that they've put together. Now, there's also probably about another 200 plus episodes that have never even made it to air. What this means is pretty much anyone in the world of trail running, ultramarathon running, distance running, or human performance related to running, be it nutritional, physical, or mental, all the best people in those fields have been on the Trailrunner Nation podcast. And Don and Scott, like these sage-like sponges of the world of running, have absorbed all of that good knowledge and spread it out to the world through Trailrunner Nation. And having them on the show today is such a pleasure because not only have we known each other a long time, I was very fortunate enough to stumble across their show before they really got big. And they must have been a bit stuck for guests because a couple of emails and somehow I found myself on the show and, well, we've stayed in touch ever since. But they managed to combine their knowledge with a really light touch. What I mean is you're not going to be battered into submission with running statistics and something much like an encyclopedia here. No, what you're going to get is an entertaining, light-hearted romp through all manner of running delights. So look, quite enough from me, other than to say this show is of course brought to you by 33 Fuel Natural Sports Nutrition. So when you're looking for the very finest nutritional products to fuel your run, your workout, hell, just your busy life, make sure you get yourself to 33fuel.com and get stocked up. But with that out of the way, let's get on to this conversation with Don and Scott, hosts of the Trailrunner Nation podcast. Welcome to the podcast. And for those of you who have made it this far, you are in for a very rare, unique treat, in fact, because here with me on the show are the two wisest men in all of ultra running. They're looking behind themselves, looking confused. There's a sort of there is a figure on your backdrop there, but no, I'm not talking about him or her. Actually, I'm talking about both of you because, come on, you pretty much invented the running podcast. Some say you actually even invented ultra running itself. But the early genesis of Trailrunner Nation is lost in the mist of time. 490 plus episodes on. How many is it exactly now?
Well, that's how many we've released. We've recorded some 7,000. Yeah, but there are only a very small percentage that actually made it, made the cut.
Only the cream made it through. With all of that, how many years? When did you start Trailrunner Nation as a podcast?
We started the fall of 2011, I believe. So it'll be 9 years next month.
Wow. So we're going back to a time when I know in America things have always been a little better than they are here in merry old England. But we're going back to a time that predates race vests, that predates barefoot running, that predates, I mean, what was it? Maybe a couple of handheld bottles and an old pair of shorts in those days, and maybe a rucksack that you could get that was small enough. I mean, we're going back into the dim and distant past of ultra running there already. And you were there.
You know, you were too, Warren. You were one of the first people that we interviewed. I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. Maybe if I did, that was 9 years ago and I've forgotten. How did you, I mean, early in the Trailrunner Nation podcast days, you started listening and reached out to us and you've been a regular guest on the show. How did you find out about Trailrunner Nation?
I found out about Trailrunner Nation by Searching. I was searching for a podcast on either ultra running. I think I was probably looking for ultra running podcasts. I was very deep into that at the time, and you guys came up, and I listened to a couple of episodes. I remember very clearly. I was driving in the car. It was raining. I was somewhere in Leicestershire, which is clearly a bit of both of your accents are from there. I
Sure.
can tell you have
Sure.
a heritage in the region, and I thought I like this. This is good. I was learning. I was enjoying myself, and yeah.
Were you drunk? Were you drunk? Is that how you enjoyed it? It was because you were drunk?
No, genuinely, no drinking and driving. Not since a very ill-advised incident with a moped in Tenerife when I was 19, but that's a separate story. So no, absolutely sober. And I went and looked on your website, and there was a contact thing, and I said I'm going to reach out to these guys. And I was glad I was sitting down later on because you actually replied.
That was Scott that replied. That's because I was
another way of
sitting in
you
my
saying,
computer.
"No, I would never have replied."
I haven't even seen the email that you sent, but I do remember Scott saying, "Hey, this gentleman," and he gave you the position of gentleman, which was generous. I think that we hadn't met you yet, and he said, "This gentleman by the name of Warren Pohl wants to come on the podcast." I said, "Well, who's Warren Pohl?" And he goes, "I don't know, but he's just a great guy." And I think we're going to have some fun. So that's what started it.
Did we qualify him before we brought him on?
No. That's when we were doing podcasts without guests that we couldn't release. So part of the 7,000 podcasts Scott's talking about were solo podcasts where guests either failed to show or we didn't have much.
You've got to keep it moving, right? And in those early days, the one thing that I think has always set Trailrunner Nation apart is the way you mix the fun and the enjoyment and the random stupidity that goes with trail running with some really serious, useful information. And let's not hide the fact you've both done a fair bit of serious running yourself as well.
Well, I think you need to have some feet on the ground experience to really talk around this. I'd have a hard time hosting or being a guest or even listening to be quite frank, a quilting podcast. I wouldn't last long, either as a guest or as a downloader. I think that I would, before the program finished downloading, and internet speeds are fairly fast these days, I'd already had lost interest. So you've got to do what you do. You can write that one down, Warren. That's one of the
That's one of the nuggets of wisdom during this episode. You got to do what you do,
and then keep doing it, and just keep doing it.
And just keep doing it. I mean, stay tuned, people, because this is only the first of many of these pearls of wisdom that are going to drop from these.
There's a crescendo coming.
but you know what? It's very, very ultra, isn't it? You've got to keep doing what you do and just keep doing it. And that's what gets you through. That's what gets you to the aid station, to the finish line, to the next turn. You just keep doing what you do and keep doing it.
And go, Scott, go.
I was just going to say, it is true. And even in the podcast, when we first started this, Don and I were thinking, we could come up with maybe 3 or 4 guests and record maybe a half a dozen episodes, and that's it. And here we are at 493 published podcasts. That's a testament to the number of people that are so smart and the amount of information that is out there that can be shared. I think that's probably the most amazing thing for me.
You think that you're doing a running podcast. Well, what's with running? One foot in front of the other, the arms have to move. You gotta have shoes. There's got to be some limit to the number of episodes you can do, but they just, either we're very forgetful, we reproduce the same content over and over.
True.
Yeah. or things are created like this, like you're doing right now. You're bringing this content out.
And what's amazing too and exciting is the number of different running podcasts that have come out since we started. We weren't the first, but there are so many different running podcasts. We have guests on all the time. We were just talking about this earlier this week. Most guests that come on our podcast have podcasts now. And I think that's great because there's just so much information. There's different takes. There's different focuses. And there's just a lot of information out there.
Absolutely.
Tell us about... Go ahead, Warren. No, please.
No, I was going to say, with all of these podcasts, and you're quite right, running, there are few things more simple in the world other than breathing in and out. It's one foot in front of the other. You swing the arms, you say you need a pair of shoes, give or take, that's it. You don't always need the shoes. But it's endlessly fascinating. It's something you could study for a lifetime and never fully master. But there are also common themes. So, I mean, what are the most popular themes you've seen? And would you say everything you deal with primarily is always ultra, or do you deal with the shorter distances as well? Because I know the focus generally tends towards that, but is it all ultra for you guys?
Well, it's not all ultra. We have to remember the audience. We have some people that are ultra runners, and some people that haven't started running yet. And then they start listening because maybe a spouse or a significant other is playing it in the car, and by default, they're pseudo runners, and then they become runners. So it's always fun to hear that someone converts from non-runner to runner. But to what I wanted to say wasn't that. But I'm happy I said it. I'm happy I said it.
You got to do what you do, Freeman,
and keep doing it.
We're changing out a SD card that we're recording into.
You've got this whole professional setup thing going on there.
Hey, one thing we have learned, and maybe Scott's talked to you about it already, is the having the guest record on their iPhone just separately and then shipping us that file. It removes all latency. It's kind of, we have boom mics and we have this fancy recorder, but their recording actually sounds, I think, maybe sometimes better than ours.
Yeah.
And it's just because they're talking into $1,000 recorder is what they're doing.
I'll send you a photo that describes what we have our guests do now.
And so it might be great for you because you can still communicate like this, but then comes a pristine file that's just beautiful. And sometimes we've heard latency where they've broken up and we go, we're not worried about that. Before we'd cringe.
Interesting. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing.
Well, that's really the theme of ultra running, isn't it? Sharing. Mm-hmm. Sharing is caring. I think when I was had my child on my knee and we were watching Winnie the Pooh, that was an early ultra lesson. Even before I realized I was going to be an ultra runner, I was practicing.
You're full of different quotes today, aren't you, Freeman? Do what you do and sharing is caring. Are you writing these down, Warren?
No, it's do what you do and just keep doing it.
Oh, sorry.
You're only halfway there. That's like going out and back and just stopping at the rock where you turn and just sitting there. So what I was trying to say earlier was before the SD card interrupted us was what's so interesting and fascinating isn't what happens between your feet and the ground, but what goes on in between your ears. That's what I find endlessly fascinating because it translates to everything. It translates to trying to find a parking spot or, shop. It doesn't matter. Life. Stay with me, Scott.
How does that help you find a parking spot?
Well, you haven't practiced it yet. You need to start working on that because
you gotta keep doing what you're doing
and just keep doing it.
That's how you find a parking spot, Scott.
You just drive that circle until somebody gives up and leaves, whatever they're doing.
You don't DNF in the parking lot.
Nobody would give in a parking lot. Here's what I wanted to say, that I think a lot of these things that we do on the trail translate well into life, and the things that we practice out there, we get to use endlessly. And I think that's why it's always fascinating, because life is very complex. It's not just running. This is more than just running. It is a life's philosophy, if I don't want to wax too philosophical.
No, there absolutely is. I think I was talking to someone about this the other day, and is there a more accessible, easier way to go and take yourself to your outer mental and physical limits than ultra running and doing it in a natural environment, getting out into nature in the trails and the mountains? I mean, the true Zen masters are perhaps the ones running 24-hour track marathons or ultras. I need some external stimulation and adventure beyond that. I can't go that deep inside my own head. But is there really a better ticket, an easier way to go and totally refresh your body and mind than to go out and get lost on a trail?
Well, and one of the first ultra running books was by Dean Karnassus, and his story is where he was out at a party and was having some internal discussions in his brain, and he just decided, I'm going to go for a run. After the party, he went and put on a pair of sneakers, and he went out and ran. I mean, that's how accessible it is. It's all you need to do is turn a doorknob.
I like that. Turn the doorknob. I think, as I remember the story, Dean was at a bar celebrating his 30th birthday and had enough courage that he had drank in that night to say, I'm going to go run. Maybe it was 30 miles.
It was a long way.
Yeah, and that's what started it. But I don't know if that's even a true story. But what I wanted to say earlier that I had forgotten is that I think we do this ultra running stuff and just long trail, whether it's ultra or not. Sometimes, running for an hour straight can be.
Sometimes 5K can be ultra.
Yes. And so it's the DNA, our DNA. We are, as humans, we thirst for challenge and a little hardship, because life has become a bit too easy and comfortable these days for so many. And it doesn't call to our DNA that our ancestors have had to rely on to keep moving the species forward. We have had to have ancestors that were so incredibly tough. And here we are, arrived safely in the nest that we call 2020, 2019. And 2020 has not been a nest. And I think that some of us reach back and want to feel some of that our ancestors had done, because it's just who we are. And so we do it. And so there are people that climb rocks that do it, and people that go out and kayak. There are other ways to do it. We just have learned to express ourselves on the trail and go there. I think it's very satisfying. And all the stories that we tell are stories of catastrophe. No one wants to hear how you were running on a cloud and things felt easy. We want to hear about the strife and the struggle and the obstacles and how you overcame. That's the real story.
Yeah, that's the reason why people watch NASCAR, right? They're not watching to see 500 laps of cars going fast. They're waiting for the crash.
But people die in those things, Scott. This is a triumphant story where we live to tell the story.
All right.
So you've given me a great idea there, and that moment of hardship, the worst black hole. Take me to your worst respective black holes. What's the moment that comes out for both your minds in your running CV where you just think, that was the moment where I just wished it would all end and the earth would open up and make this pain finish?
Which one?
Can I twist that a little bit just to see how well Don and I know each other?
Oh, this is like Mr. and Mrs.
Let's have each of us tell the other's biggest black hole and see if we're right.
Careful with your terminology.
Because as you were asking the question, I thought of one situation that is documented on video of where Don had a bad spot. Unfairly, I published that publicly, that video, but it was a video that he took and sent to me privately. And then without his permission, I posted it. And it's out there on YouTube if you want to go look at it.
That is the one. Are you going to describe it in any detail, or just that it is a YouTube?
Yeah, you were at mile
140
of the Moab 240, and you were having a bad spell, and you sat down and you started recording so that you could send me and probably a couple other confidants this video of why you were going to quit the Moab 240. And to put this in context, he had already run 2 other 200 plus mile races within 60 days of this race. So he had run the Bigfoot 200 and the Tahoe 200. And this was 3 weeks after the Tahoe 200. Went out for the first time in Moab, ran 140 miles and was not having a good day. Couldn't drink, couldn't eat. He couldn't process food. His legs were tired, and he sat down and he had this conversation with himself and the few people that he was going to share it with, where he talked about the reasons why he thought he should quit. And it's actually quite compelling. I thought the arguments were compelling, but the end of the story after he hit the stop button was that he continued the next 90 to 100 miles and finished that race and the Triple Crown of 200s that year.
I wanted to record that so I could be honest with myself, because I wanted to see if I was truly in the shape that I felt I was in. It was kind of a forward mirror reflection. How bad was I? Was I as bad as I was feeling? And as I look back on that tape, I should have had an award, because I was really trying to make my face look like it really was awful.
Have you watched the video?
I have, because you posted it. and it wasn't for a few confidant friends. It was for me, Scott.
We post podcasts all the time and you never listen to those. Why would you watch a video that I posted?
Well, I wanted to see if you really posted it all.
Did you, as you were watching the video, do you feel now, let's say this was 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to watch it now, do you feel that you had the right reasons to quit?
No, I realized that when I was done hitting record, I didn't have the right reasons to quit. Mm-hmm. So that's why I finished
very
it
quickly.
Yeah, I was watching the video, the screen as I was recording it, going, this guy is full of crap.
So is that the lowest you've ever been?
No, that wasn't.
What is the lowest?
Well, I'm going to tell your lowest, and then I'll tell the true lowest.
Okay.
Well, hold the thought a sec, because I want to throw in there, pick out of this, that the cathartic act, it's almost like diarying or journaling, the cathartic act of expressing to your phone, your video, your recorder of how bad you're feeling and how much you want to quit, and getting all of those thoughts that are circling in your head out, but also ideally on a camera and seeing, he's all right. You're not that bad. Like, the way you feel is rarely the way you actually look. And that can A, be cathartic to get it out, and B, it can be another way of getting going when you think you're done in and actually you've sat down to give up. And I've been in the same place. And I remember looking at the recording after, I was like, there was nothing wrong with me. It was all up here. Sorry, diversion. Back over to you guys.
You're absolutely right.
No, that's what you do on podcasts. It's an exchange. And so here's what got me out of that, though, Scott. It was looking at the video, as Warren said, and thinking, this guy isn't as bad as he's.
So did you watch it as soon as you recorded it?
Yeah, because I did 2 of them, because the first one didn't come out that well. No. Are you kidding? You posted the first one I sent you. And so here's what pulled me out. And believe me, and anybody that's listening to our podcast knows, we don't like to shine the spotlight on ourselves, but I'm clearly shining a spotlight because it's your podcast, Warren.
And that's what you're here for. You're the superstars. Come on.
So I called a friend, Bob Crowley, and I said, hey, Bob.
We know Bob.
Yeah, you know Bob, of course. And he said, let me do some math for you. And I know he's, very intelligent, very mathematical. So I'm trusting, because I had 140 miles and no food and tired. Your math skills aren't high. And he goes, Don, all you have to do is travel XXX. I forget the time, but he was so convincing. I really didn't understand it. But he sounded convincing. I really could walk backwards and finish this thing, the way he made it sound. And then I met a gentleman about within, less than a mile. And I said, hey, I just spoke to a very smart and wise friend, and he says all we have to do is walk backwards and we'll finish on time. And he said, great. And we combined our resources and we pushed through that next few hours together until things got better for either him or I, and we separated. But that moment was very important, and it came from teamwork with just another colleague or a soldier out there getting it done. And
that's one of the beauties of this sport is that relationship that you build with complete strangers out there, whether it's a race or even just a training run. You can meet people out there and instantly share a commonality.
So Scott Warren's new to ultra running, right? And he's maybe inspired by looking around and seeing a couple of his friends do 1 or so races. So it's early on, and he says, I'm going to strap on a pair of my best lawn mowing shoes and go out there and do a race. And so he picks one of the toughest races in the area that has the heart of the canyons of Western states, where all these talented runners start at the top of a hill and they have to go through this canyon grinder to prove themselves worthy for a finish. And so Scott...
And sorry, just for those who are not so familiar with the Western States course, the canyon section, is it difficult because of the heat or the terrain, or both, or what is it that particularly makes the canyons a feared section on that course?
Oh, well, all the above.
And you can make up a few other.
and the witches and the spiders.
And the buried brothel hookers.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And so this is Scott's race. And he's racing it, and he's learning some early lessons.
Well, just to put this in perspective, this is not in the canyons. Western States has these 3 infamous canyons. This is actually after that. It's another descent. Is that the one you're thinking about?
Well, that's my story, Scott.
Oh, sorry. I'll just shut up.
You were just running there, Scott.
Okay, go
God
ahead.
knows best.
Go ahead.
And so Scott's learning some early lessons like fueling and fluids and things like that. And chafage, he's learning about glide and different two toms. And this was before squirrels, nut butter, glide, all these things back in the day. And so all of a sudden he musters up as he's coming back, and he's been very sad sitting on a rock without much fluid. And he starts going again. And the next thing he knows, he's chasing a guy that is wearing nothing but just casual hiking clothes. And so Scott's, as I remember the story, Scott, as Scott is looking all the part of your ultra runner on Trailrunner magazine or ultra running magazine, he's chasing down this guy and can't catch him that's just wearing some casual hiking gear. And he was humbled a bit by thinking, there's more to this sport than I think I know at this point. So I would say that's one of your lowest points in the stories that I've heard.
You know what the funny part is that was kind of a combination of 3 independent stories.
that surely is in the best tradition of all the based on a true story film made ever.
I think that's the beauty of telling these stories, is because they get better and they morph. And that's actually very funny, because it is truly at least the summary of two different scenarios or stories.
Well,
but it was all pretty true.
How about you, Warren? What's your lowest, deepest black hole?
I'm gonna, there are probably 2, but the one that I'm gonna go with.
Put them together like I do. Just
put them together.
Blend them.
I'm going to invent a whole new race somewhere between Scotland and the Alps. This race is on the Isle of Jura, Jura, on the west coast of Scotland. It is tiny, it is remote, it is beautiful, it is home to 200 people. It has 1 road, 1 pub, 1 hotel, 1 post office, several thousand deer, and nothing else. And once a year, they hold a race across the paps of Jura. That is local speak for the hills or mountains or whatever. The interior of the island is wild. There's not really anyone there anyway. It's incredibly rocky. It is incredibly steep. You can forget there being a trail. Like, there might be 2 trail runners there normally, but there's no one to establish a trail. The point is, this wild, remote, beautiful island is, and the Jura Fell race held once a year, that it's an incredible race. It's a unique location. It is stunning. Every time I remember it and think about it, it stirs my soul in a way that I think, my God, I want to go and run that again. Until I remember, it's the most unpleasant running experience ever, because the best fell runners in the UK turn up. And for anyone who knows the UK, fell running is sort of in the north. It comes from the north of England, where they are a bit tougher. The weather is harder. The ground is harder. It's rockier. I am from London, which is sort of urban and a bit soft, right? So I'm not exactly in my element at that point. Whereas all of you regular fell runners, they're very tough. They're all used to it. I had a moment like your moment with the man in the camping trousers, Scott.
Yes.
Having made the first climb out of Jura, it's out of I forget the name of the actual town, but whatever it is, you start in there, make your way up this mountain, and at the top, as I was getting my breath back and starting to go down, a man ran past me wearing a pair of shorts, some old Walsh's trainers, no top, and he just had a like a circular metal drinking bottle attached on like bandolier straps crossing around him. And that was it. And he just tore off down this. I could hardly walk down this slope, like with this rough scree and broken rock everywhere. The fell runners just pitched themselves off and let gravity do it. And I had some sense of self-preservation. There was another old guy who pretty much seemed to be carrying his stuff in a carrier bag, who also left me for dead in the same place. They're a different breed. It was a unique experience, but it's only, I don't think it's even 20 miles, the whole race. But you're off the island. The island isn't big enough to go any further unless you do laps. But the ground is so horrendous. Like, you're twisting an ankle with every step, even when you're on what looks like it's flat. You're falling into bogs. You can hardly ever run. So having run this race twice, having been seduced by the wonderful romance, mystery, amazing scenery of it all, I had Erica make a video for me at the end, and I can even send the video to you. And it's me saying, if I ever think of doing this race again, please remind me of this moment, that I must never, ever come back. And that has stayed as a place marker. And bear in mind, since then, I went on to run many races that were a lot longer, that were in the Alps, in other parts of the world that are inhospitable. But the Jura Fell race is one that I remember with fondness, but the abject horror at the time, I think, has yet to ever been beaten.
Do you find that it's easier to remember the bad races that you had than it is the ones that just pulled off beautifully?
Have you ever had one that's pulled off beautifully? Let me ask that question.
Well, yes. There's one that stands out in my mind as a best ever, and I look forward to trying to improve on it one day. But yeah, the one Lavaredo Ultra Trail 2014, categorically the best race I've ever run. It couldn't have gone better, and I got more than I expected out of that, and that's rare.
Have you, Freeman?
Yeah, as I think back on it, and I listen to other people's story, and I'm thinking of, I think Ellie Greenwood talking about her Western States run, and had nothing went wrong, and it was just magical all the way down. And as I look back, I've had some runs I would slide into that category, but if I was truthful, I'll bet you during that race, I had some challenges. I just don't choose to remember those challenges. I don't think anything comes across in my experience as just effortless and enjoyable.
That's kind of a dichotomy that I never thought of before, because as humans, we're programmed to forget the bad things.
That's why we have siblings.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I mean, women, if they would remember what they went through in childbirth, they would never have a second child. And so we're programmed to forget those bad things. But on the other side of that coin, we remember in these tough times the difficulties we had and how we overcame them. Maybe that's the difference, that we overcame them.
Well, maybe that's why we're still here as humans, because there's a lot of trauma that goes on out there. If you're going to go hunting to bring in the antelope, there's some challenges out there. I mean, you've got to hunt it down, and it's probably hot, and you've got to carry it back, and there's some fleas that happen maybe on this antelope, and just there's some tough things, but you've got to go out again and do it. So I think just the very nature by design that we forget or push off some of the trauma so that we'll be encouraged to go out and hunt for the camp again.
And to Warren's point, recorded a video saying, I'm never, ever, ever going to do this again. But then you forget about that and you sign up for a race in the next 24
he's never gonna
48 hours.
He's never going to do that race again.
It was never that one, but it's to your point there, both of you, even the good races are surely not without dark times. it's what you said, Scott. It's about how you've overcome. There are some times when the dark times will get the better of you. There are some times when they will not. And maybe the difference with an ultra distance race as opposed to a 5K or a 10K is you are guaranteed to have some very dark times in them. It's only how you. I can't believe that even the world's best runners, even if they're running these trails in half the time or less than the rest of us would do it, I can't believe they don't go through some horrible moments either. But it's surely how you've been able to manage your way through them with the corresponding highs that you then also know you're going to get.
Yeah, through my running maturity, which is a nice way of politically correct way of saying getting older, right? I admire the people that can put the race together. Not the first one through, but the person that managed their own personal inventory well. You know, there's a lot to be respected for someone that recognizes their limitations at that moment. You know, on another day or maybe in another hour, they won't have that limitation. But the one that can recognize where they're at and what they need to do to move out of that and to stay mentally positive, there's your champion ultra runner. That's the person you really want to aspire to be. Mm-hmm. Because even the most elite, the fastest and the most fleet of feet, they're only going to be spectacular for a period of time. But these careers in ultra running could be many decades. You can't stand on the first place on the podium for many decades. That just hasn't happened. But to manage a race well is something that is developed over time. And the people that are mid and backpack might be the ones that you want to be talking to and not the runners up front, because some of that's just from physical gifts that are just happening. The person in the middle or the back of the pack might know more about ultra running, about managing a race than anybody up front. And so people that want to read the article magazine or listen to the podcast with the podium finisher might be shorting themselves.
Warren, I want to ask you, at the starting line of the many races you've done,
running with the mayor.
Well, I was going to bring that up
sorry,
later.
Scott. I was reading your mind.
No, I was going to mention
I'm reading your mind where you're not even thinking about it. I'm reading the seed of a thought. That's how tuned in I'm into you.
You read my notes is what you did. Warren, if you're in all the races you've done, you're standing at the starting line. Can you identify that person that Don just described, the person that you know has figured this out? And to put a caveat there, I don't know whether anybody has ever figured it all out, but there are some experienced runners out there that have a better likelihood of putting it all together. Can you spot that person? And I don't know whether I can. Maybe I can. Maybe I have a good some ideas of who that is, and try to saddle up next to that person and really try to suck that knowledge out of them. Have you ever had that experience, or can you identify that person?
I mean, definitely at the start of any race, my mind is generally telling me that everyone else in the race is that person. And the only person on the start line who is not that person is me. So
I think we've all been there.
That's a bit of him. But as to spotting that person, I mean, no, I don't think I could, because everyone is going through the same roller coaster of self-doubt, self-belief, self-doubt, self-belief. Am I ready? Am I not ready? Kit and clothing doesn't really tell you anything. I think you are, well, I think my antenna are only sensitive enough to even begin to notice those people in the second half of a race. And that's assuming I'm still in a position to look above my own feet.
Well, and to Don's point, this whole running with the mayor, and I'll tell you the story behind that. But I think for me, at the starting line, the people that are the wisest and the ones that really have the best likelihood of executing their plan are not the ones that are first across that starting line. They're the ones that are a little bit further back in the pack because they have learned about patience. The story about running with the mayor, if you don't know this already, is one of the early podcasts that we did with Warren. He talked about
this whole idea that we all fall into at the starting line, where you're so amped up, you have the adrenaline going, and you just take off way too fast. And Warren told us a story. I think this was at one of the UTMB races, where you made the conscious effort. I'm going to tell the story and then tell me if I got it wrong. The conscious effort that you were going to follow the pace car that has the mayor sitting in the car that follows the whole pack out. So that's the caboose of this train of racers. You were going to run with that car who had the mayor in it, and that was going to force you to start slow. Is that somewhat accurate?
It's actually better. I think you've improved on it. That is the Steven Spielberg movie version. The true version is close. It's simply that for anyone who knows UTMB, you start in Chamonix. The start is downhill towards Les Houches. And the thing about it, everyone's really amped up and really excited. Everyone goes out too hot, apart from a few at the front who will keep that pace. And you're then going to hit traffic. So you're not only going to go too hot, you're going to end up doing the world's worst interval session, which is like sprint, stop, walk, sprint, stop, walk at the beginning of an ultra. I wanted to keep myself in check, so I just went at a steady, basically walk out at the beginning, and then you get left behind and you end up catching up with the traffic, and then somewhere outside Les Houches, things are easing up. I could get into my own rhythm. I had taken it so easy that when I looked behind, there actually wasn't anybody behind me. The only person behind me was the organizer's car with the mayor of Chamonix in it. They were bringing up the back, and that was it. So that they were the last person with me. I was absolutely dead last at that point. But there's 100 X miles left to go.
And for those of us that don't know, how many people are running UTMB? That's not your small lottery race. There's a lottery in a sense. It's tough to get into, but there's a lot of runners there. How many?
2,000 runners that year.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've increased the number since, but yeah, it was 2,000.
And you were number 2,000 out of the starting line. Congratulations, Warren.
Thank you very much. One of my best running achievements being at one end of the field at least.
And what was the result? Were you successful with that strategy?
I was successful with that strategy. I executed negative splits, and I came home in 700th and something or others. So there's going to be a few drops along the way, but I believe I overtook 1,300 people.
Very nice. Very nice.
We've even had some local runners, and we say, well, what's your strategy? And they've told us, I'm going to run with the mayor. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a good way to hold it in check, right? But I mean, come on, you talked earlier about the idea of executing a race. And I think there's a real gem of information and a mind to be tapped here, because the number of different, you've both got your own deep running experience, but the number of different running brains that you have tapped and spoken with, what do you think, looking back now on all your experience, would be your recipe for executing your best possible race? How would you go about advising people to put that together?
Well, that's really a great segue for what I was for a comment that I wanted to make a moment ago, and that is, if all the race starters, the runners wearing bibs, were some type of avatar, right, and controlled by a knowledgeable, and we're all knowledgeable, whether we exercise that knowledge when we put our bib on is suspect. But if we were sitting back and we had, it was some type of video game, we had our avatars out there, could we manage that athlete down the trail, watching for different indicators? How many hearts do you have left? How much energy? What's the temperature? And just all the variables that we love to juggle in a ultra race or trail race. And we could do that from our chair with our avatar. Could we get that avatar down to the finish line? And I'll bet you the finish rate would be 90+%. Forego a rolled ankle or things you just can't control, or maybe somebody had a flu that you can't get over, that type of stuff. But making wise decisions, I think that we could do it. And I think that executing a race should not be emotional. You have to remove yourself from the context of what you're married to, not who, but what you're married to as far as expectations. You've got to live in the moment, and you've got to be there. You've got to be completely honest. Where am I? How am I? What do I need to do? And you can't say, well, that's not going to allow me to make my splits. That's not going to allow me to stay with the person that I came here with or I want to talk to. You've got to remove all of that, and you've got to be in the moment. You need to be able to project that there's a long finish ahead of me, but you need to make your strategic decisions, your fueling, your pace, your gear, your all of your decisions that need to be monitored at that moment. So that's what I think race execution is.
I'm thinking we need to contact Nintendo and start writing code for a video game.
I think I'll go for a run while you get that done.
You know, I was going to say a similar thing that you have to, the thing that I have learned talking to very wise people over the last almost 9 years is you have to listen to your body and be honest with yourself. But the other thing is Don, just was that your second point? The other thing is something that I learned probably in the first 3 months of running on the trail, and definitely before the first race I ever ran, and that is take what the day gives you. So you may have this expectation that your training has gone perfectly and everything is just setting itself up to have this momentous day on race day. But for whatever reason on race day, your body doesn't want to cooperate, and you can get into a negative spiral within your own head that feeds upon itself, and you just end up blowing up. You need to go into a race thinking, I'm just going to have a good day. I'm going to take what the day gives me. And I think that's one of the things that's really helped me, and one of the great lessons I've learned.
And maybe one of the things to that's a great point, Scott. And,
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the things to remember is nobody really cares about your outcome except you. So what the heck? At the end of the race, at the finish line,
Nobody cares.
Yeah, you get the Charlie Brown teacher voice, blah, blah, blah. Somebody's talking, like, when they're done talking, I'm going to tell them about my race. And then they don't even listen to you. See, you're just out there. Everybody is, concerned more about themselves, I think. Which might say a lot about my personality, right, Scott? I do care about your race. I really do.
But no, I think that idea of take what the day gives you and connect rationally, not emotionally, with your executing your plan.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two pieces of gold right there, and there is, both of them speak to the idea of ultra running and trail running as something very much that forces us to be present. And when you are present, then you are aware of what's going on. You have to be aware, am I too hot? Am I too cold? I mean, some of the best advice is the simplest. One of my favorite bits of advice about dealing with weather is the best way to not get cold is to not get cold. And the point of that is, at the point when you start even thinking you might get cold, stop and put your bloody jacket on. Get a hat, get whatever you've got. And if you haven't, well, you weren't prepared. But when you're cold, it's too late. That's not particularly profound. It's incredibly simple, but it saved me so many times. And that idea of simply being in the moment, taking what the day has to give, executing the plan rationally, those are two great pieces of advice.
And that's what the time on the trail teaches you, learning to listen, listening for the clues that are there. I remember we were speaking with, I can't think of his name. You edit this stuff, right?
Totally. Absolutely. Yes. We have a team of 10 working on this.
Talking about how to make sure that you don't become dehydrated. And that is to drink before you're thirsty.
Tim Noakes,
thanks.
Dr. Tim Noakes.
Yes, from South Africa, who's written the great books and helps steers he's a thought leader in everything that we're talking about. And I apologize to him. But he probably listens to Warren's podcast. We don't have to worry about him on our podcast.
He's a great hero of ours. He's not only the author of the seminal book, Law of Running, he's a great researcher and studier. He led early work into carbohydrate and endurance athletes. And he's a man who is not so proud that he would not change his opinion in the light of changing scientific evidence, unlike a lot of what we see in nutrition. This is a man who openly says, if you own a copy of Law of Running pre whatever year it was, please tear out the chapter on nutrition, because, I've learned more, I've moved on. And, the drink before you're thirsty, eat before you're hungry, it's something he totally flipped on. And I really respect that and had learned an awful lot from his work. So big fan. Please do carry on.
Yeah. So I couldn't remember his name, and Warren just gave a complete a resume for Dr. Noakes. So I think learning to listen to early cues is really key, because, like you said, don't get cold is the key. But what do you listen to make sure that you're not thirsty, or you're not hungry, or that you're getting low on fuel, or that your energy stores, your legs have this feel to them, and there's a hill coming up, so I better be conservative so I have something left for the rest of the race. That's being honest with yourself. That's listening to early cues that new runners that are learning to listen. There's no shortcut. You can't take a course and read, and you've got to go out there and bonk. You've got to go out there and experience, when I push this far, it breaks. And so you've got to go break every once in a while. And once you've broken, and you've learned from that, then you're becoming a better runner. It's not that you have failed as a runner because you broke. No, you just learned what you needed to learn not to break again. And that's the beauty of the sport. You're always growing in it. There's new clues.
I think in that area of finding those clues, have you found in your own journeys that the comparison between the runners you are today and the way you are able to see those clues coming up, i.e., I should eat something, specifically what type of food, or I should drink something, specifically what type of drink, I need to slow down, I need to hold my pace, I'm strong, I can hold this for the next 4 hours, whatever it is. Your ability to tune into the signals your body is giving you, have you found that is a skill that has improved over the years? And if you have, how would you compare your sensitivity to it now compared to when you first started running on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say I'm a stupid person. We have had a lot of very smart people on the podcast, and we've learned a ton. I've run a lot of miles. I've run a few races, and I still make stupid elemental mistakes. The last race that I raced, I DNF'd because I was stupid. I actually ran with the mayor. I was the last one across the starting line. But the mistake I made was I wasn't eating and I wasn't drinking. And when I came to the point where I DNF'd, I reflected back. I wasn't in the moment, and I reflected back. How stupid was that? How come I wasn't fueling my body? So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, have I improved? 10 being the most, 1 being the least. I would say I'm a 2.
But you were a 1, right?
Yeah. So there is improvement.
Look at the trend, Scott. Look at the trend.
I doubled.
And I think if it was before the race, if you had to do a multiple choice to qualify you for this race, and you had to get a fairly good score to get your bib, and they said, would it be wise to run this race on as little fuel as possible?
Exactly.
And we're not going to do A, B, and C and D here, Scott. We're just going to true or false, okay? You knew these things already.
Yeah, so
but you just didn't
why?
practice them.
So why? That's why I'm not a very bright person.
Well,
How about you?
There's a lot to think about when you're running, and stopping. And actually, when I go back to an earlier point about the previous generation in ultra running, we go back to the sort of 2011, 2012, 2010. It's not that long ago, but running vests was still a new thing. You wanted something to eat, you pretty much had to take your pack off and get it out the back, then put your pack back on, or do some really contorted hunchback type move to get it. There was no I'll just reach in this really handy front selection of pockets here. So I can understand that if, in a situation like that, you might go, I'll eat in a bit, I'll eat in a bit, I'll eat in a bit. Oh, whoops, I've totally run out.
I want to say one of the greatest things that I've seen over the years, and this isn't a shameless plug for 33 Fuel, although it is, wink, wink. Back when I started running, there were these gels that were very sweet and sugary, and that's really all there was, that and real food. And now there's such a lot of, there's so many different options out there that are savory and good for you, and something that you can eat for 24 hours or 12 hours or 6 hours or an hour, whatever, how long you're out there. So that's one of the things that is really exciting.
It's exciting for us as well. And the only thing that gets me is there are a number of new brands. And when we started, when we made our very first products in 2012, you guys were among the first in the world ever to even try them. You were the first in North America to ever have our Cheer Energy Gel. When we started the company because there weren't any alternatives, right? And I see new brands popping up now, and it's great. Bear in mind, the more brands in the space, the better. Like you say with podcasts, a rising tide raises all ships. It's great. We're not fighting this battle to improve the nutrition industry on our own. There are lots of different people, lots of different ideas. It's great. But I see brands that go, we started our brand because there were no alternatives. There really are now. Like, were these people blind? Had they not heard of Google? Like, there's quite a lot of good stuff out there now. And I think that's a great reflection on demand, but it's a great reflection on people are voting with their feet. Then none of these new brands or our brand or alternatives would exist if it weren't for the fact people like them.
I forget the question, but I have my answer. Okay. and so we talked a bit about negative thoughts about, how am I doing right now? I need to monitor this because this is going a bit south on me, and I need to make an adjustment so it doesn't continue on that trend going further south and take me out. So you're looking for negativity and trying to monitor those along the way. But very importantly, and probably more important, is to look for positivity and ride that wave and stay on top as a positive runner, moving with positive energies through your journey. And then when negative comes by, swat it away, recognize it, but stay in your positive space. And I probably one of my favorite moments in running, and it's reproduced itself occasionally, and I call back to it. I go, this is just like the time that I was thinking about that time, is that you're running along and you're at deep miles, whatever that might be, and you're just feeling good. And it's like, dang, I put this together right. My legs feel good. And you're really not even concerned about your pace. It's not like, boy, my hour's good for where I'm at right now. It's just like, I've really taken care of my body. I've moved through with the body that I have. When you're at the start line, you have to look at yourself and you have to look about how much fuel's in your tank, what your tires look like, what's the map say. You got all of your stuff and you need to execute that vehicle that day. It's completely different than a week ago or maybe, the next day or a month from now. It's what do I have today? What's my journey? How do I execute? And that's a trail runner. That's the deal of getting in there and taking what you have and making use of it. Like you're saying, Scott, what the day gives you. So you have to take inventory on the trail and yourself and then execute. So I think riding the positive wave of putting yourself in a good spot, getting deep in the miles and celebrating, you know what? I've done well here. You've got to be your best cheerleader, and nobody's out there to watch you. So it really doesn't matter. You've got to be your best friend. You've got to be your ally. You've got to be your colleague in competency of the mental piece, the physical piece, everything. I've said in the past, this is like since I didn't know the question, I'm just a lot of answers here, a lot of answers. and if you ever really want to know yourself and get to know who you are, do something hard, whatever it is. And for us, it's trail running because we just love it so much. But if you really want to know what you're made of, go do something really hard that challenges you and introduce yourself to yourself, because you'll be impressed at who you are to get out there and just execute, do it well.
And one of the victories, whether, it could be a podium, it could be a finish, but I would say one of the victories is
that moment, and however long that moment is, of that flow state that you were just describing. That's, to me, the victory, whether it's a trail, just a training run or a race. When you can finally get into that flow state where your legs are feeling good, the positivity is running, everything is just firing, your avatar is just moving down, and it's not, you're not looking at the pace, it's not work, it's actually easy, and you're in that flow state. I think that is what I strive for, and that's what I think of when I think of victory.
That's the golf swing that you swing. And I don't play golf, but I'm just, you swing and you just hit it right, and it goes forever straight.
You don't even feel the ball.
It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens. And it made me kind of think when you were explaining that, Scott, like that Mario game from back in the day where he gets all these superpowers and he twinkles and he can run through everything. That's kind of the flow state,
You've been bringing up a lot of software, a lot of video games during this podcast, Freeman. I'm getting a little concerned.
COVID-19.
We've got to do something while we're inside. You can't run around the kitchen table all day long. But that moment of going to find that experience, I think we started off with just do it and keep on doing it, and we've now escalated to this sort of inner long distance wisdom that you have there. In COVID-19, we cannot ignore it, really. I'm guessing it may be the same over in the States. We have a lot more people running in the UK, primarily because there's not really anything else to do, and more people have worked out that, well, I should probably look after myself, and running's a pretty easy, accessible way to do that.
And the gym is closed. The gym is closed. The gym is closed.
The gym is closed. So is the pub. What can you do? Go for a run. Therefore, more people running. My hope is that there will be more people running more. And more people running more might mean more people thinking, I wonder if I could run more. Meaning they might go and leave the road for the trail. They might go and leave the park for the road. They might progress to a marathon. They might decide to do an ultra. What would be your advice to someone who's now feeling like, hey, I think I could do this running thing, and now they want to go and explore trail and possibly those outer limits of their distance, and go and find something hard for themselves?
I'm going to jump in front of Scott on this one, and I hope that hasn't been too a bit habitual lately here on this podcast. But you ask such great questions, and my memory is so short that if I don't get my answer in, it goes away completely.
Or I steal it.
So
he forgot it already.
I'm coming up with it.
He just looked at me and went, big eyes. I think I just forgot it.
And so my point is, to the new runner, is running is not supposed to be hard. Don't make it hard. If it's hard, back off a little bit. If it's hard, you won't keep doing it. If it's physically taxing and it brings misery and it's stressful, who wants to do that all the time? I mean, it's fun to dip your toe in a little stress, no doubt. That's kind of what propels us down the trail. But as a whole, we're supposed to enjoy what we're doing. So if you want to walk that stretch, then enjoy and walk that stretch. Give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to keep your heart rate low. Give yourself permission to walk that stretch because the birds are there. You can hear the river, and it's just okay to walk.
And one of the great lessons that we learned from a frequent guest on this podcast, Dr. Phil Maffetone, is slow down to speed up. It's okay. When you're first starting, go out and hike a trail. You don't have to be doing 6-minute pace on a trail to become a trail runner. Go out and hike a little bit. Go out and start running a short distance and then hike a little bit. By keeping that heart rate low, you're actually going to improve your fitness much quicker than if you were to go out there and do interval training day one.
And those are the people that end up with stress injuries, whether they're shin splints, knee pain, plantar fasciitis. Your heart and lungs get in shape faster than some of the supporting structures. And so it's good to not only think about how's my heart rate, I'm not as winded, I'll keep pushing. You're building more than just your heart and your lungs.
That fascia.
Yeah, you're building all of those things. So that's important to remember. The people that are injured are usually the ones that are starting too fast, and the limitation usually isn't your heart rate. It's the connective tissue that fails on you.
The other point that I would give that is one of the beautiful things about this sport is realize there's a community out there that is more than willing to help you and share knowledge. There's running clubs. There are running stores that have lots of, don't be afraid to reach out. We just talked to Kim Strom, who admittedly is very private and very shy. And that's one of the things that she has found through trail running is reaching out and introducing herself. Don't be afraid to reach out, because we are not a very scary bunch once you get to know us. And to your point, Warren, with more people entering, our community is not a community that likes to shelter the sport from people. We want to reach out. The more, the merrier. And that's what I love about the community is people more than willing to say, hey, come join me on a run. Let's go. Let's run a mile together. I love that.
You're right. I think it's an incredibly easy access sport, very light on ego and very quick to embrace and help. And it's certainly something I've seen with community, but I think it's really something that you guys have championed. And let's face it, your show fans some of those flames and makes that fire burn brighter. You're quite an integral part of it. And I think the same way that you can't just go and run an ultra overnight. You need to layer the fitness on. You need to layer the knowledge on. You know, the heart and lungs. I think that's a great point, Don. The heart and lungs will likely be ready before the rest of the body is. But once you've layered all that on and you've got there, in much the same way as that's how you get to run an ultra, you've layered this podcast on piece by piece by piece. You've never stopped showing up. You've never stopped doing the work. And the people that you've attracted into your audience, into your studio, just goes to spread that whole community and ethos of ultra running and trail running so far. And I know you would have a laugh and say you don't do anything and you just mess around and you're just sitting behind a blanket in Don's kitchen or whatever it may be. But really, it's a seminal piece of work. I love it, and I'm so excited that all those years ago I stumbled across your podcast, and we've been able to enjoy so many good times since.
I can recognize a wrap, a full circle. And what I heard you just say is just keep on doing what you do and keep doing it.
Just do what you do and keep on doing it.
Yeah, that's it.
You forgot the quote. You forgot your own quote.
It's my quote.
Guess you can change it.
You've just hit it perfectly. You brought it right back, even better than full circle. Keep on doing what you do and keep on doing it. And people don't you ever forget that.
Thank you for having us on your podcast, Warren. We owe you at least about 23 more of them. You've been on ours so often, and we're always grateful for that and scratch our head wondering why he keeps showing up. We just love talking to you, and
He's never told us no. Every time we've reached out to Warren, he has never said, I don't want to be with you guys anymore.
Even after the game shows. Yeah. We take chances over here at Trailrunner Nation. I mean, we'll sign up for a race without knowing the distance, kind of like the string race that you brought up on an early podcast, right? A race in England, a ball of yarn, and you don't know how far you're going to run until the race director gets tired. I forget. But
wait a minute. I see, that's the beauty of doing this for so long. I have no recollection of the string race.
It's a ball of string race. I don't think it even still exists because it was such a horrible and difficult mental concept in that the few people that did start it didn't know how long they were running. Would it be 10 hours, 20 hours, 5 miles, 100 miles? They knew it would be an ultra likely, but it may not be. And they got to a point where they were down to, I think, 3 people, and then one of them dropped. And it turned out that, and again, the checkpoints were no one knew where the checkpoints were. And the next checkpoint was like 100 meters away, and one guy got to win it.
What does that have to do with string?
The idea being the expression, how long is a piece of string, when you don't know how long something is.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go listen to that. I don't
Listen to our own podcast. We need some downloads.
I have no recollection of that. Absolutely no. Was that one you did without me?
No, we didn't do any without you. But I think in the spirit of this discussion, the string race really positions an athlete, runner, participant to measure their effort. You don't know if it's going to be 3 miles or 300 miles, but if it's going to be 300, you better run the first 3 like the last 3. You better just be steady, easy, and measured, or you're not going to make it. And so I think I like the idea of the string race because you just have to be reasonable and honest with yourself all the way through.
I think everyone likes the idea of it as a story. I think the actual reality of it must have been utterly horrendous. But hats off to the person who won it. And the guy who dropped, thinking I've had enough of this, and clearly the organisers then decided the finish line was like 100 meters away. Brutal, very specially brutal.
And one of the great things that I have learned from ultra running are the lessons that it teaches you that transcend just running. The lessons that you can equate to your business life, to your personal life. You know, we don't know when this mortal coil will end, right? So it's a string race. Our mortal journey is this string race. Do you like that, Freeman?
What he did there?
Do you like how I brought that into this philosophical thing? But
that's just blown my mind.
That's all I have. I'll just drop the mic right now.
So do what you do and keep doing it.
Keep on doing it.
Because life is it's not like a box of chocolates. It's like a piece of string.
Oh, that's good. That's deep.
Scott, Don, it's been wonderful having you on here. I just wanted to check for people who want to connect with you more, and seriously, people, you really should, particularly if you're running, but even if you're just thinking about doing more of it, you need some entertainment. You need these guys more in your life. Where can people find Trailrunner Nation? How can they best get connected with you?
You can use this thing. It's a newfangled tool called Google. And you just type Trailrunner Nation, or you can go to our website, trailrunnernation.com. That's how you get there, Freeman, because he's never been on our website.
Yeah, you know, well, there's a good reason for that. Now, you can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher and all of those.
All of the different podcast players.
Are we on Pod Pickle?
Is that a real one, or did you just make that up?
Looks like I better take over distribution.
We're on all of them, Freeman. I know we're on all of them. iHeartRadio, Spotify. Those are some. Apple, iTunes, of course, Google Play. What are some new ones? Amazon. We're Amazon now has podcasts.
Pod Pickle.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
That's new platform.
Thank you, Warren, for having us on your podcast.
Guys, it was a pleasure. Get yourselves out to trailrunnernation.com. So there you have it, folks. Don and Scott from Trailrunner Nation. Give those guys a great big hand. And as ever, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Do get yourself over to trailrunnernation.com if you want to check out more of their great work. And of course, get yourself over to 33fuel.com when you need the very best in natural sports nutrition for your sport and your life. You'll find all of the links that you need for that in the show notes below, as well as, of course, to the 33 Fuel social channels on Facebook and Instagram. So let us know what you thought. Connect with the guys at trailrunnernation.com. Keep up all of the good work that you're doing out there, and very much look forward to you joining us on the next episode. Thanks again.